Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern delivered her first big economic speech of 2019 to a business audience this morning, outlining economic challenges facing the country, the impact of Brexit and foreshadowing a restructure of polytechs. In her State of the Nation address, Ms Ardern said the government had already spent $100 million bailing out 4 polytechs and the system was struggling. Our political editor, Jane Patterson, was at the breakfast and I asked her if the Prime Minister did enough to wow the audience.
I wouldn't say that it wowed. It was comprehensive, and Jacinda Ardern received some acknowledgement from the audience that actually she traversed a lot of ground, but there was nothing new in it. It was all about reassuring business about those economic headwinds that she said are potentially coming down the line, US and China, and the Brexit deadline, of course, a no Brexit deal causing further problems. But there was a warm reception for her, but I wouldn't say rapturous. There were quite a few stony faces in the audience when she was laying out Labour's plan. I wouldn't say that business seemed completely convinced about the new government just yet, but certainly, as I said, it was acknowledged that she had fronted up and were talking about things that were important to business, including securing those trade deals amid those very uncertain circumstances.
And some of the other things that she's talking about have been pretty prickly issues, which is the tax review. She touched on that in her speech. Do you think anyone in that community would be assured by anything that she said?
I think if anyone in the business audience was arriving at that speech expecting any kind of signal about a capital gains tax or any other tax changes, they would have been disappointed. But the government has made it very clear that when they have considered the report, which they have now, they will make their position clear only when they go public a bit later in the year. Now, that is partly because they are vulnerable on the tax issue. Jacinda Ardern slipped and slided around on some of these details in the election campaign, and they really had to move quickly to confirm exclusions like the family home and in fact the land beneath it, and that was something she reiterated again. She did make a remark during her speech that the speculation about the tax working group and what might come out of it had become feverish. Clearly a huge amount of interest, and the government is going to have to manage this process very, very carefully.
Because it was also interesting when the media got to ask questions at the end. She was very good at doing the sidestep around questions about whether she personally would support a capital gains tax, and in fact didn't rule out the prospect that having no such tax was still under consideration. Like there's a possibility, no, we won't go there.
Well, she has to be operating within the coalition arrangements. Now, what we do know is, personally, Jacinda Ardern is very much in favour of a capital gains tax. She made that very clear in the election campaign last year.
Yet she won't articulate it now.
That's right, because she can't articulate her personal position and then be contradicted or blocked by New Zealand First in particular, who have made no secret of their objection to a capital gains tax. Now, a lot of this has been dancing around what it's going to be, what it's going to look like. Remember too, Grant Robertson, after the interim tax working group report, said there will be no set capital gains tax at a set rate, the sort of traditional CGT that we've seen, but there are other options for taxing gains on capital, getting around the other way if you were. So it's going to be interesting, the politics of this. Will New Zealand First come on board with a tax that's different enough from a capital gains tax to be able to be palatable to them and also fit with Winston Peters' past comments about his objection to a CGT?
Yeah, because she mentioned in the speech that they're deep in talks with their coalition partners. Would you like to be in the room for those?
Of course they are deep in talks. I'm sure those talks are very frank and robust because, as I said, this was something that Jacinda Ardern really staked her leadership on in a way in the election campaign last year. Her campaign against the National Party, Bill English, was about intergenerational inequality, and she saw capital gains tax as being a direct answer to some of those housing affordability issues that people are facing and that the government is still grappling with. So it is going to be the sort of policy that they will not be able to come out and state a government position until they have the agreement of New Zealand First and the Greens, of course, as well, because any tax change will need to be legislated for. It will need the backing of both coalition and confidence and supply partners. And the plan at this stage is to put it onto the statute books before the election, so that National would actually have to repeal it if they came to power, and Labour would be able to, of course, just keep that in if they won the election and implement it more quickly as well.
And that was our political editor, Jane Patterson.